Abraham Lee Shakespeare was born on April 24, 1966, in Lakeland, Florida. He grew up in a poor family and struggled academically, dropping out of school after the 7th grade. Reading and writing were always a challenge for him. He worked various jobs throughout his life, most of them low-paying and labor-intensive. At the time of his lottery win, he was employed as a truck driver's assistant, helping deliver food and supplies across Florida. On November 15, 2006, Abraham's life changed forever. That morning, he and a coworker, Michael Ford, stopped at a Town Star convenience store in Frostproof, Florida. Ford went inside to buy drinks and cigarettes, and Abraham asked him to purchase 2 $1 Florida Lotto tickets for him. One of those tickets would soon make Abraham Shakespeare a multimillionaire. 2 days later, on November 17th, the winning numbers were announced. Abraham's ticket had matched all 6. He just won a $30 million jackpot. News spread quickly. Abraham Shakespeare, a working-class man with a limited education, no bank account, and no financial background, had become a Florida lottery millionaire overnight. He chose the lump sum payment option, which amounted to $17 million after taxes. A check was cut in his name, and his picture was taken holding the oversized ceremonial lottery check. The press asked him how he planned to use the money. Abraham responded modestly. He said he wanted to buy a home for himself and his mother. Wasn't flashy, and he wasn't interested in luxury. Wasn't the type of man to wear gold chains or designer suits. Shortly after the win, he moved into a $1.1 million home in a gated community in Lakeland. It had a pool, 5 bedrooms, and a spacious kitchen. It was a drastic shift from the small and humble home he was used to. But the money wasn't just for him. Abraham began helping those around him, friends, family, even strangers. He paid off mortgages, bought cars, helped with medical bills, and gave generously. However, the win was not without controversy. Not long after he received his payout, Michael Ford, the coworker who bought the ticket for him, filed a lawsuit. Ford claimed that the winning ticket was his, and that Abraham had stolen it from his wallet while they were on the road together. The case went to court. During the trial, Abraham testified calmly, insisting the ticket was rightfully his. Surveillance footage from the store confirmed that Ford had bought 2 tickets. He had given them to Abraham before leaving. The judge ruled in Abraham's favor. The ticket and the fortune that came with it was legally his. Still, the publicity from the lawsuit drew unwanted attention. Abraham began receiving visits, letters, and calls from people asking for money. Some were polite, others were aggressive. Everyone seemed to want a piece of his fortune. He tried to handle it with patience. He continued giving when he could, but the requests never stopped. As time went on, Abraham started to withdraw from people. He became cautious and skeptical. Friends noticed he was different, quieter, more guarded. The joy of his win was fading. Despite having millions in the bank, Abraham still lived simply. He didn't travel the world or invest in expensive art. He had no interest in stocks or flashy business ventures. He helped others, often more than he helped himself. Those closest to him began to worry. Abraham often said he was tired of being asked for money. "People don't care about me," he once said. "They only care about what I can give them." He was beginning to feel the weight of his newfound wealth. Abraham's story had all the elements of a fairy tale. A poor man wins millions overnight. But beneath the surface, trouble was brewing. The line between generosity and vulnerability had started to blur. His willingness to help others made him a target, and soon, someone would come into his life pretending to offer help, but with a far more sinister plan. For now, Abraham Shakespeare was a lottery winner, living in a beautiful home with money in the bank. But the dream was beginning to crack. What had once felt like a blessing was starting to look more like a burden. After winning $30 million, Abraham Shakespeare didn't change much about himself, but everything around him began to change rapidly. He remained soft-spoken, preferred casual clothes, and drove modest vehicles. He didn't rush to buy flashy jewelry, yachts, or luxury vacations. Instead, he focused on giving. He gave to friends, family, and even strangers. Abraham believed his lottery win wasn't just for him. it was something he could share. He helped people pay off debts, bought houses for relatives, and gave cash to neighbors who needed help. If someone had a sad story, Abraham listened, and often. He handed over money without asking for anything in return. He was generous to a fault. And it didn't take long for people to take advantage of that. In the weeks after the win, word spread across Lakeland and surrounding towns that Abraham Shakespeare was the man with money. People began approaching him, not just friends or distant cousins, but complete strangers. Some would wait outside his house, others tracked him down in public places. At first, Abraham tried to help where he could, but the requests kept coming. One neighbor asked him for $1,000 to pay for dental work. Abraham gave it. A distant acquaintance said her car broke down. Abraham bought her a new one. Someone said their power was going to be shut off. Abraham paid the bill. Soon, people stopped asking politely. Some became aggressive. They felt entitled. And every time he said no, it added pressure and guilt. His generosity began to drain not just his bank account, but also his peace of mind. Family members noticed he was growing distant. He didn't smile as often. He avoided public places. He stopped answering his phone. In private moments, he admitted he was overwhelmed. "I thought this money would make life better," he told a friend, "but it just brought me more problems." What of those problems came from his own family? Some relatives started asking for larger and larger amounts. When Abraham hesitated, they questioned his loyalty. They accused him of being selfish. The irony was sharp. A man who had given so much now felt isolated, untrusted, and used. Around this time, a legal battle also unfolded. Michael Ford, the co-worker who had bought the lottery ticket for Abraham, filed a lawsuit in 2007. Ford claimed the winning ticket was his and that Abraham had stolen it. He argued that Abraham owed him at least a share of the prize, if not all of it. The case went to court. Abraham defended himself, explaining that Ford had simply purchased the ticket on his behalf. Ford admitted to doing regularly on their delivery runs. Security footage from the convenience store confirmed the purchase. Abraham had not stolen the ticket. The judge ruled in Abraham's favor. The court case was dismissed, and the ticket was legally declared his, but the damage had been done. The lawsuit attracted media attention, and Abraham's name and fortune were now known throughout Florida. People he had never met began writing letters, knocking on his door, and inventing excuses to meet him. Abraham found himself retreating from social life. He still tried to help when he could, but it was clear that his generosity was being exploited one day. He reportedly said to a friend, "I'd have been better off broke." The comment wasn't just frustration, it was a signal that the dream had soured. He began driving alone more often, sometimes disappearing for hours. He started carrying large amounts of cash in his car, always prepared to give someone something, but also cautious of being robbed. He was becoming paranoid. The man who once trusted everyone was now afraid of almost everyone. Friends described this period as a turning point. Abraham wasn't angry or bitter, but he was clearly tired, mentally and emotionally. He felt the money had created a wall between him and the people he cared about. To some, it seemed like Abraham was being naive. To others, it was a sign of his pure heart, too trusting, too giving. But either way, he was becoming increasingly vulnerable by late 2008. Abraham had given away or spent a large portion of his winnings. Some of the people he'd helped were grateful, but others disappeared after getting what they wanted. Few of them stuck around to support him. He began wondering who was really his friend and who was just using him. In public, Abraham avoided eye contact, kept a low profile. But the money made him a magnet, and soon another person would enter his life, promising to help him manage everything. She would pretend to protect him. She would offer to handle the chaos, but in reality, she would exploit his trust in a way that no one else had. Her name was Doris Donegan Moore, and her arrival would mark the beginning of the end. By late 2008, Abraham Shakespeare was drained, not financially, but emotionally. He had given away millions of dollars to people who had promised to stay in his life. but most of them vanished after getting what they wanted. Strangers kept showing up. He no longer trusted the people around him. He was tired of being seen as a paycheck. He needed help not just with his money, but with his life. That's when Doris Dee Moore entered the picture. Was a 36-year-old businesswoman from Florida. She was bold, talkative, and confident. In early 2009, she reached out to Abraham, saying she was interested in writing a book about him. She claimed she admired how he had handled sudden wealth. She told him she wanted to help him tell his story, not just to share it with the world, but to protect his legacy. To Abraham, this sounded like something new, someone who wasn't just asking for money, but offering a chance to do something positive. Dee Moore quickly worked her way into his life. She gained his trust by saying she understood what he was going through. She told him he was too generous. She said people were using him. She claimed she could protect him. She offered to manage his money and help create a financial plan. Abraham agreed to do this. She formed a company called Abraham Shakespear LLC. However, she made herself the sole officer. The business account was opened in her name. From that point forward, large sums of Abraham's money were under her direct control. At first, she made it seem like she was just helping, but her actions told a different story. She began making purchases using Abraham's money, not for him, for herself. She bought a brand new Hummer. She paid for a Chevrolet Corvette. She went on shopping sprees. She claimed to be investing on his behalf, but in reality, Abraham had no control over how the money was being spent. She also moved Abraham into a small rented house that she controlled. She told people that it was for his safety, that it would help him stay away from people who kept asking for money. In reality, it was isolating him soon. Even close friends and family couldn't get in touch with him directly. Calls went unanswered. Visits were deflected. Dee started telling people that Abraham wanted privacy, she said. He had grown tired of being in the spotlight. She told different people different stories, carefully controlling the narrative. Behind the scenes, she was moving money, forging documents, and making herself look like his legal guardian. In April 2009, Abraham disappeared. But Dee didn't report him missing. In fact, she actively tried to hide the fact that he was gone. She began sending text messages from Abraham's phone to his friends and family. But the messages were suspicious. They were long, detailed, and grammatically correct, far more polished than Abraham's usual messages. People who knew him well were immediately concerned. Abraham struggled with reading and writing. He rarely texted in full sentences, let alone with perfect grammar. His friends knew that something was wrong. Still, Dee insisted that Abraham was fine. She said he was traveling. At times she claimed he was in Texas. Then she said he was sick, in a hospital. Later, she told someone he had gone to Jamaica to start a new life. Her story kept changing. Meanwhile, she continued spending his money. She even went so far as to pay someone $5,000 to pretend to be Abraham and send a birthday card to his mother. She offered another man money in a used truck if he would call Abraham's family and pretend to be him. These attempts at deception didn't last. Most people weren't convinced. By late 2009, police began to take a serious interest in Abraham's disappearance. His family filed an official missing persons report. Detectives began looking into the people closest to him. All signs pointed to Dee Moore. When police first questioned her, she gave strange answers. She said Abraham didn't want to be found, she said. He was hiding from greedy people. She even told investigators that he had gotten tired of life and left everything behind. But her answers didn't match the facts. Bank records showed unusual withdrawals. Property records showed she had gained control over Abraham's assets. Witnesses described her buying luxury items, paying off her debts, and bragging about her connection to Abraham under pressure. Dee tried to shift blame. She claimed Abraham had given her everything willingly. She said he wanted her to manage his money. At one point, she said he had run away because he had killed someone and was on the run. Later, she suggested he had committed suicide. Her stories didn't add up. Police also discovered that she had a history of fraud. In 2001, She had been charged with insurance fraud after faking a carjacking to collect money from her insurer. That case ended in a plea deal, but it showed a pattern. She was willing to lie for money. By the end of 2009, detectives were convinced that Abraham hadn't disappeared voluntarily. They believed he had been murdered. They believed Dee Dee Moore knew exactly what happened, but they still had no body. That would change soon, and when it did, the truth about what she had done would finally come to light. By April 2009, Abraham Shakespear had disappeared. Friends and family noticed first. His phone stopped answering, stopped visiting his mother, stopped responding to the few people he still trusted. For a man who had already begun withdrawing from the world, his silence felt different this time. Heavier, final. Doris Dee Dee Moore told everyone not to worry. She claimed Abraham was fine. According to her, he was tired of being used for money, wanted to disappear, to live quietly without people harassing him for handouts. She insisted he was still alive, just done with the world, but no. One close to him believed it. The texts sent from Abraham's phone raised suspicions immediately. They were written in proper grammar and complete sentences, nothing like Abraham's usual texts. He struggled with writing and rarely used text messages at all. His friends were sure Abraham wasn't the one sending them. Still, for months, Dee Dee kept up the lie. She told his mother that Abraham had gone to Texas. Then she changed the story and said he was in the hospital recovering from illness. Later, she claimed he had gone to Jamaica and didn't want to be found. Excuses changed constantly. Police began watching her. They examined bank records and noticed irregular activity. Even after Abraham had supposedly left town, his accounts were being accessed and large sums were being moved. Moore was making purchases, paying off debts, and transferring assets into her name or the name of her company. She had already taken control of Abraham's house and cars. She continued living off his money. She even gave interviews to the media, claiming Abraham was alive and had simply left to escape the pressure of sudden wealth. She cried on camera. She played the part of a friend who just wanted to protect him. But behind the scenes, police knew something darker had happened. Investigators learned that Moore had asked multiple people to lie for her. One man said she offered him $200,000 to tell police he had seen Abraham alive. She gave him a cell phone and told him to call Abraham's mother, pretending to be her son. He refused and reported her to authorities. Another man, Gregory Smith, agreed to help the investigation. He had done business with Moore and earned her trust. The police used him as a confidential informant. They wired him and sent him back to Moore. Over time, she told Smith that Abraham had been murdered and that she knew where his body was. She hinted that someone else had killed him. But the lies kept changing. She said drug dealers were involved. Then she said it was an act of self-defense. Then she blamed her son. But investigators knew she was trying to confuse them. In January 2010, Gregory Smith got what police needed: a confession and a location. Moore told him that Abraham was buried in the backyard of a home on Dorchester Drive in Plant City, Florida. She had once owned the property and still had access to it. She led Smith to the site and pointed to a newly poured concrete slab behind the house. She had claimed it was to build a fire pit. In reality, it was a cover. Police immediately secured the property and began digging. Underneath the concrete, they found a body wrapped in plastic. It was buried 5 feet deep. The remains were confirmed to be Abraham Shakespear. He had been shot twice in the chest. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was homicide by firearm. There were no signs of a struggle. It appeared he had been ambushed, possibly killed while he was sitting down or unaware of the danger. The timeline became clearer. Police believe Abraham was murdered in April 2009. Not long after he had been moved into the house Moore had rented for him. After the killing, she buried his body in the backyard of a property she had access to, then tried to erase all signs he had ever existed. But the lies caught up to her. Moore was arrested in February 2010 and charged with first-degree murder. During her initial interviews, she continued to shift blame. She said Abraham had been killed by drug dealers. She said she had only helped cover up the body. She even claimed he had killed himself, and she panicked. None of it added up. Police had physical evidence linking her to the scene. They had the informant's recordings. They had the financial trail. They had the false texts, the forged signatures, and the lies told to friends and family. And now, they had the body. The woman who claimed she wanted to write a book about Abraham Shakespeare had taken control of his life, stolen his fortune, and buried him in the ground. His story had started like a dream, a working man winning millions. It had turned into a nightmare, but the case wasn't over yet. Next came the trial, the final chapter of the curse that followed Abraham to his grave. The arrest of Doris D.D. Moore in February 2010 brought a sense of relief to Abraham Shakespeare's family, but not closure. Abraham was gone. His body had been found buried in a backyard under a slab of concrete. The man who had once smiled with a $30 million lottery check in his hand had died alone, discarded and silenced by someone he trusted. But now, justice had to be served. Prosecutors charged Moore with first-degree murder, fraud, grand theft, and accessory to a felony. She pleaded not guilty. The case moved slowly through the legal system. Dee Dee insisted she hadn't killed Abraham. She gave multiple contradictory versions of what had happened. At one point, she claimed he had been shot by drug dealers. Then she said he was killed by a man named Ronald. She later suggested he had shot himself, and she had only helped bury the body in panic. In yet another version, she blamed her teenage son. The stories kept changing, and none of them matched the evidence. The trial began in November 2012 in Tampa, Florida. Prosecutors presented a clear and damning case. They laid out a timeline of manipulation, deceit, and murder. They described how Moore had gained Abraham's trust under the pretense of writing a book about him, how she convinced him to give her control of his finances, how she moved money, bought luxury items, and eventually isolated him completely. They showed evidence of how she sent fake text messages from his phone. They played audio recordings from informant Gregory Smith, in which Moore all but confessed to the killing. They showed how she offered money and bribes to multiple people to lie to police and impersonate Abraham. Most damning of all, the body. The jury saw crime scene photos of the backyard where Abraham's remains had been buried. They heard from forensic experts. They listened to testimony from people who had known Abraham and who never believed for a second that he would abandon his life, his mother, or his son. In court, Moore showed little emotion. Her defense attorney argued that she had made mistakes but wasn't a murderer. They tried to suggest others may have been involved. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the jury didn't take long to reach a verdict. On December 10, 2012, Doris D.D. Moore was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional minimum of 25 years for using a firearm during the commission of a felony. After the verdict, Abram's family spoke to reporters. His mother, Elizabeth Walker, said she was thankful that justice had been served, but no sentence could bring her son back. His teenage son, Moses Shakespeare, had to grow up without a father. Knowing his dad's life was taken for money, the case made headlines across the country. People were stunned that a man who had once had everything, fame, fortune, and a chance at a better life had been taken advantage of, murdered, and buried in secret. True crime documentaries and news specials followed. ABC's 2020's aired an episode titled Unlucky Numbers Investigation. Discovery featured the story in Deadly Women, Hulu's Web of Death, and Curse of the Lottery included his case in episodes focused on lottery-related tragedies. Over time, Abraham Shakespeare's story became one of the most referenced examples of what is often called the lottery curse. It's the idea that sudden wealth, especially when unprepared for, can bring more problems than solutions. That money can attract greed, manipulation, and danger. That a jackpot can turn into a target on your back. But Abraham's story isn't just about the curse. It's about trust. It's about how easily kindness can be exploited, and how people, like D.D. Moore, use charm, sympathy, and lies to get close before taking everything. Today, Abraham Shakespeare is remembered not for how he died, but for how he lived, humble, generous, and hopeful. He wanted to help others. He trusted too much, and that trust was used against him. His story is now a cautionary tale, not about money, but about the people money can attract, and about how, for some, the dream of winning the lottery can become a nightmare far worse than poverty.